This podcast is with Frank Liebl, who is with the Newton Development Corporation, NDC. He'll tell you what the Newton Development Corporation is all about and how it got started and what their goals are for the future in just a couple moments. But first, a word from our sponsors, including Clem & Mackey Insurance, where your insurance policy comes with an agent. And on their Facebook page, they're talking about the big basketball game coming up. No, they're not talking about the NBA, WNBA, or NCAA. They're talking about Granny Basketball. And guess who's playing on the United Way of Jasper County All-Stars team? None other than Clem & Mackey Insurance's very own Alex Maudlin. Come and watch Alex and the teammates take on the Granny Mustangs and this fun night of basketball, crazy antics, pie auctions, and even a chili feed on Saturday, November 2nd. That's Granny Basketball. Now, the doors open in the gym at Newton High School at 5 o'clock. The tip-off again at 6 p.m. They'll have celebrity guests and so much more. It's a NHS Wrestling pregame chili feed going on there. Also by the folks at Newton Clinic, whether you're looking for someone to help you on your health journey or a teammate who will have your back when it comes to keeping your body game ready, you'll want to call the new doctor at Newton Clinic, Dr. Perrin. He might be the provider just for you. It sounds like a kind of doctor that you'd want on your side. Give him a call or text him at 641-792-2112 to schedule an appointment with Dr. Perrin at Newton Clinic. And also by the fine folks at Ryan's Tire and Auto on First Avenue, Newton. Had a good time last week doing a live stream from his one-year celebration at Ryan's Tire and Auto. You might have seen that he donated $500 to the Courthouse Lighting Fund. And also on his Facebook page, of course, just like Clem & Mackey, he's very community involved. And coming up on Veterans Day, Monday, November 11th, he's talking about the Veterans Spaghetti Supper that is coming up at the Masonic Lodge at 208 First Avenue West, upstairs. The entrance on the east side has stairs, and the entrance on the south side has that elevator. Veterans eat free. Friends and family for free will donation. It's all you can eat, spaghetti, garlic bread, dessert, and drink at the Masonic Lodge in Newton, sponsored by Ryan's Tire and Auto on First Avenue in Newton. It's time for another Out and About with Jamie Grout podcast, and I'm excited to find out about NDC, the Newton Development Corporation, and my interview guest is Frank Liebl. And Frank, I learned a little bit about NDC from working with your wife. And after you sold the radio station, your wife stayed on as the office manager, and I had learned some things I had never known about NDC, and I'm sure there's a number of people listening that do know about it, but for those who don't, maybe you could explain what it's all about.
Yeah, well, NDC is short for the Newton Development Corporation, and actually was founded back in 1961 when a group of local investors bought about 65 acres of land in the northeast part of town. That's where the industrial park was formed, and today the industrial park generates over $4,000 in tax revenue for the city of Newton, because of the industry that developed over the course of time. You know, it's where Klein Tool is and some of those other businesses out that part of town. And actually the radio station building was located there along Lake Walden's family funeral home. Mm-hmm. But to be honest with you, those aren't really industries we're looking for, but for many years that land sat vacant because when Maytag was here, we had a tough time as a community attracting any kind of other business besides Maytag, because first of all, we couldn't pay the wages, and second of all, the workforce. And so as a result, the board had sat in that land a long time, and then we had some other companies said, hey, can I buy a parcel here and build a new building? And that was great, and that happened. Mm-hmm. But today, we're out of land. We've sold all our lots out there. So that's kind of a thing we're looking at right now. What can we do to develop some more industrial spots?
So how do you go about doing that, Frank? It sounds like you're kind of in a recruiting position.
Yeah, we really are. I guess the thing is we are working now with some of our economic development partners like Iowa Interstate Railroad and Alliant Energy. These are people that have a vested interest in trying to make communities grow. And in the months coming, I'd say next 3 or 4 months, we're going to hear some big things that the railroad is doing. Just because they have some options, some land, it doesn't mean they'll exercise the option for sure. But they just finished developing about 40 acres just directly south of TPI that's going to be a new renewable energy distribution center. And so I was out again the other day, and my gosh, the center's about ready to go. They have laid down almost a mile of new rail track. They're doing transload off cars right now. But I think you're going to see this thing grow over the course of time, and you'll see more of the energy renewable companies using the rail to ship their products instead of being on the highway.
That's fantastic. And speaking of TPI, what is the status of TPI these days? I was out there just today driving around a little bit, and it looks like there's some things going on out there. I don't know what it is, but something's happening.
I'm not at liberty to say when they're going to start up again, but it will be in 2025. That's all being controlled by General Electric. That was their customer. And at this time, they want to just say, hey, they're going to have a release here in the future, but they will be up and running again sometime in 2025.
When companies are thinking about coming to Newton, what are some of the first things that they ask about, that they're curious about for Newton, Iowa?
Well, I think one thing one thing that's always important is what kind of workforce. Do you have the workforce? And matter of fact, that's how we were lucky to get TPI and at that time Trinity Towers, which is now Arcosa Towers, because they could have gone anywhere in the Midwest, but most of their customers were located within a 600-mile radius of Newton, Iowa. And we have the great access to the interstate. That's another big thing in our favor. But I think the neat thing was when they took a look at Newton, they said, well, first of all, there are available buildings like the former manufacturing plant, and there is a workforce. And I think, as a matter of fact, when TPI started up, at least 25% of their workforce was former Maytag employees.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I came to Newton about 16 years ago, right after Maytag closed, and boy, I tell you, people were doing like the old hee-haw thing, gloom, despair, and agony on me. But doesn't it seem to you? It seems to me that Newton's kind of in its renaissance period.
Well, it is, and that was a tough time for everybody. There's no question about it. Maytag was a 3-generational company. Grandfather, father, son worked there, and so it was tough. But I credit the community of being resilient and just hanging in there. Like I said, there were a lot of tough years, but I think one thing that really stood out to me back in 2008, we had a community forum, kind of a strategic planning thing. I remember that was held at DMAC Auditorium over there, and at that time we had over 300 people attend. And it was part of a Newton transformation because we had to reinvent ourselves as a community. Because no matter where you traveled in the United States, if you were flying on the airline or whatever, if you say you're from Newton, Iowa, the first thing people would say, oh, that's home of Maytag. But no longer. And so, we had to reinvent ourselves, and we did so. I mean, when Maytag finally shut down, the final 1,850 jobs went away between the plant and a corporate office. At one time, of course, you well know this, they employed over 4,000 people. But they had been downsizing. So it took us about 4 years, and we actually had a plus gain in new jobs. We had 15 new companies located in the community. At that time, it created over 2,000 new jobs. So it was a trying time, and yet I think we knew that we had to diversify our economy, because the thing that I think our board and some other people we worked with, the city and the county, didn't want to put all their eggs in one basket again, and maybe have the same thing happen again where you're one major employer of 3,000 or 4,000 people, they leave, and then where are you at?
How is NDC funded?
Well, it's funded. We do get some funding from the city of Newton, and the rest comes from private investors. And we get about 40% from the city, and about 60% we go out and we raise.
Well, that is fantastic. That's great that people are, invested in investing in Newton and wanting to make it better and grow even more. I don't know if you can speak to this or not. Maybe this is more of a question about talking to the Parks and Rec people or some other folks, but I'm going to ask you about the proposed softball complex that we keep hearing about. Is that ever going to get off the ground? Do you know anything about that, Frank?
Well, a little bit, but again, that is being handled more or less by the city.
Okay.
And which it should be at that case, but I know they've invested a lot of time and a lot of money in this effort, and they keep working towards it, and I hope, like everybody else, that it comes to fruition here in the future.
That'd be nice. It'd be a great addition to the city of Newton. Other than asking about the workforce, what else do companies want to know about Newton when they come here? I talked to Ethan at the airport,
Sure.
And he said, boy, that's one of the pluses for the city.
Well, it really is. And then, of course, I think some of the buildings we had available, I mean, when when TPI first was going to come to Newton back in 2008, hey, Plant 2 is a 1.8 million square foot building.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a perfect place for us to locate our business. But as they went in and looked at the facility, they found out that the building didn't have the length they needed between the column spacing to do the big blades. So they said, well, we'll just build a new building because we are sold on the community because of the workforce again, the closeness to the interstate, that type of thing. But it worked out very well for Arcosa. Arcosa right now, leases over 330,000 square feet. They were the longest serving client today, still in that building.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I give a lot of credit to is Phoenix Investors. They acquired the plant back in 2015. Phoenix Investors is a company out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And what they do basically is they buy old, mothballed manufacturing plants, and they stick millions of dollars into it and then retrofit them. I'm really pleased to say that today that plant, as I mentioned, is 1.8 million square feet, is almost 100% full.
Is that right? Yeah. I was going to ask you about that too. Who all is in there besides Arcosa and, the company that rents it out? But I know there's a lot of different entities in there, Frank.
Advanced Wheel Sales is there. We've got a portion of Montera is over there. The other one that's just a new one that just came to being is Camps. Which is a pellet company. They lease over 3,000 square feet.
I was wondering what all those pallets were doing out there in the parking lot. Okay.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of small ones, but most of it is warehousing. So what we really try to do is we try to get manufacturers, because warehousing does not create a lot of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But, from Phoenix's perspective, they had this massive renovation, and they're going to lease to whom they think is good. Again, it's a good warehouse place because of the fact it's close to the interstate, and that's what people want, is that access to the interstate.
Well, and we're recording this at Legacy Plaza,
right.
And I did a podcast with Kim Didier here a few weeks ago, and it still has plenty of space available for rent, but it's a slow process, but it seems to be getting occupied.
Well, it is, and I give a lot of credit to DMAC, what they've done with this since it was gifted to them almost 6 years ago now. But when you look back in 2011, there was a bid that was received by the owner in 2011 to tear down all these buildings. And I think a lot of people would have been heartbroken had that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to, actually, the owner then decided to say, well, instead of paying all this money to tear down the buildings, let's put it on the market for $1.
Oh.
And they sold it for $1, and then they sold it to a company over in Grinnell, and he moved his corporate headquarters over here, and really didn't do much development because as he told me a few years later, he said, that's not what I do. I'm a manufacturer. So he says, what do you think I should do for those buildings? He had considered giving them to a couple of them to DMAC, and so I basically said, well, the way the campus is wired, because everything is all together, you either got to give none or give them all. And so anyway, they worked out a deal with Des Moines Area Community College, and they have just done a great job with this campus.
What are the next steps do you see for Newton Development Corporation? What's your vision for the future?
Well, I think the big key is, as I mentioned, we're out of land for development sites, but I think that we're really pleased with our relationship with the railroad, Alliant Energy. They put a lot of money and resources into trying to help us grow the community. There aren't many sites in Iowa that have rail access. And the thing about what people don't know about Iowa Interstate Railroad, it's what they call a short line railroad. It goes from, Cedar Rapids and then, of course, Council Bluffs all the way to Chicago. But it could connect to all the Class 1 rails. So that is so vitally important to a company that uses the rails, because no matter where you want to go, West Coast, East Coast, North, South, you can get there from using Iowa Interstate.
It's like a network.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that is really neat. Well, I have to bring up radio, Frank.
Yeah, okay.
How long were you in the radio business?
Oh, a long time. Well, I actually started in Yankton, South Dakota back in, my goodness, I got to go back here. It's going to get my age. But anyway, no.
Was it a WNAX?
Nope, it was their sister station.
Oh, okay.
There, but it was 1968 I started radio. And then there were a couple of years that I moved down to Oskaloosa. I was there 18 years before I moved to Newton back in 1989.
Okay. great.
And so then anyway, I was able to be in Newton, and so probably 40, 45 years, something like that.
Well, as you know, I almost came to work for you at one time. It didn't happen because I had a chance to go to Waterloo, and I hadn't been in a rated market, and I wanted to see how I would do with ratings and whatnot, and I had a great run in Waterloo. It was fantastic. But my dear friend Kyle Martin did end up coming to work for you on 2 different occasions, as a matter of fact.
That's correct.
And he's still going to work at KFJB in Marshalltown, and I did a podcast with him. If you want to listen to that, you can find that on the Out and About with JamieGrout.com website. He's a funny guy, very talented guy, and whatnot. But I got to ask you, your feelings on the status of radio right now. I don't mean to throw any hardball questions at you, but it doesn't look real good. I hate to be a negative Nelly about it, but how do you feel about radio, Frank?
Well, radio's still got a place in my heart, and a place in the community or wherever. But unfortunately, there are a lot of. I'd go back maybe 10, 15 years ago. All of a sudden, corporate got really involved. They took away a lot of that local ownership. And as a result, I think that corporate just doesn't run radio like the people that were involved on whether myself or John Carl, who was many years in radio, Frosty Mitchell, Evan Grinnell, those kind of people. They knew what it was like to have a local radio station. And when corporate comes in, sometimes it becomes greedy.
Yeah.
And it's all about profit over personnel.
Do you feel, Frank, like it all goes back to the 1996 Telecommunications Act, where the FCC said companies could own as many radio stations as they wanted, and then they just bit off more than they could chew?
Oh, I think that's exactly right. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. It's kind of sad. How do you feel about AM radio? Because I know there's some car manufacturers who, well, they didn't want to put AM in the car radio. Right. Do you think AM radio has a future?
I do, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think, matter of fact, it wasn't too long ago after the hurricanes that hit North Carolina, where I saw a report where a lot of people didn't have cell phones because the cell towers were down like that. And there was one AM radio station in North Carolina that would manage to stay on the air, and they were able to relay messages, emergency messages, not only from law enforcement and FEMA, but people are trying to find whether their relative was safe and that type of thing. It was AM radio that they were going 24/7 just reporting this type of stuff. So, there's such a big role they play in that type of a situation.
That's very important, isn't it? I mean, you know how it is when there's tornado warnings and there's bad weather or there's whatever the case might be. The local radio station is so vital to an area, and unfortunately, we've lost that around the area too. This is maybe going to be a tough question for you because you were in radio for so long, but let's specify it to KCOB and Energy 106.7. What's your best memory of owning those radio stations?
I think just the relationships you make with people. There's so many things that over the course of the years, of course, I was part of the broadcast of the Newton Cardinal football games. They had great football teams in those times.
Yeah.
And they're doing well, this year too.
Yeah.
And they have the last few years. But that was always fun. I think coming up with clever promotions and just being able to, be out in the public and do different things like that. And then, as I mentioned, the relationships you'd make with people, because that's always so much fun. I think the key is when you work in radio. One thing that I really concentrated on was the advertising part of it, of course, and being able to help businesses succeed. A lot of times say, well, I don't know how I should advertise or what I do, and then you'd be able to take them an idea. And it works. And then you really feel good about that.
And it comes down to having a good product, because both sales and programming has to work hand in hand. And what I hear so much from people, what they really miss, not only the local sports and things like that and the news, but the obits, the funeral announcements.
That's true.
And just all that stuff. And again, I can remember when I was a kid growing up in good old Newton, Iowa, hearing, well, school's closed for the day. You could stay in. I mean, we always tuned in. And as you know, I have a history. I used to bug John Carl like crazy when I was a kid. And I always wanted to be in radio. And it hasn't left my heart either. I absolutely love radio too, but radio left me, unfortunately. And ever have any regrets about getting out of radio at all?
No, really not. It's just one of those things. I wasn't looking to do it, but it's one of those things that an opportunity came by, and I thought, might as well do it. And,
How did this opportunity come by for NDC?
well,
Frank?
somebody had offered to buy the stations from me, and I said no, I wasn't interested. And it's one of those things that I didn't hear anything from, and that was fine. And then later on, they made another run at it. I said, you know what, it might just be time, and so I did it. And but I just love being involved in the community, and so then right away I went to work for the Newton Development Corporation as a part-time person, and did that for about a year and a half, and then I was named full-time director in '09. So I've been doing this for a long, long time.
That is fantastic. Well, good. Onward and upward for Newton Development Corporation. If people want to find out more about NDC, Facebook page, website?
I've got a website, newtondevelopmentcorporation.com, and there's all kinds of information on that about who we are, what we do, and that type of thing. And I just think that the future is still bright for Newton. When I look back at the population of Newton, Iowa stayed basically the same for over 60 years. When I say basically the same, it didn't vary by more than 400 or 500 people, and that is really something. I always use that to my advantage. And people say, well, Newton is not growing. I never grew over those 60-year period. But I said, when you lose 4,000 jobs out of a community, and you can stay stable with your population, that's pretty important.
Well, and it has stayed fairly stable, but from what I understand from Craig Armstrong, Newton, right now anyway, has the highest population that it's ever had.
Yeah, the 2020 census showed the highest ever, and it's a 3.5% increase. Part of that is that we've created a lot of housing. The Newton Development Corporation back in, I think it was 2012, we did a housing survey because none had been done for years. So we paid for it, got it done. And one of the first things it showed is you have to reestablish a new corporation called the Newton Housing Development Corporation just to concentrate on housing. We did that. And then I remember at that time, the city administrator, Bob Knable, said, okay, look, we've got the organization, formed, and how now can we go about and get some new housing starts? And there's a lot of reasons why we weren't getting housing starts. The metro's growing like crazy. Couldn't get builders to come to town. We had a tax abatement in the community where you got, for 2 years, you got 100% off your taxes. And then it was kind of a sliding scale, 50, I think 30 and 20 or something like that over the next 3 years. But together, we put our heads together and we came up and said, hey, how about doing this $10,000 the minute you move in a new home, you build a new home of a certain value, you get $10,000. Jamie, in 2011, we had 0 housing starts in Newton. 2012 and 2013, we had a total of 7.
Wow.
Well, since the housing initiative in 2014, we've now got 124 new homes have built.
Fantastic.
$30 million in value. And here's what I think is so fantastic. Of those 124 new homes, 50% of new people that have moved to Newton. New people that have moved here or used to be living here and have moved back. That's how you grow a community.
That's fantastic. And I know that Craig Armstrong and Bruce Showalter kind of work together in that effort, don't they?
Absolutely.
What maybe you can define a little bit what Craig does as opposed to what Bruce does.
Well, Bruce is basically, that's his job. He is the director of the Newton Housing Development Corporation. And again, he has to work with the city a lot of times because they try to work on, Arbor Estates, a new thing that they have where the new housing is a lot of it's taking place. NHDC bought that land. Okay, and so they're responsible for selling the lots and marketing them, and the city put the infrastructure in.
I see.
That's how that worked together.
I see. Working.
So and much like I work with the city on certain projects, so does NHDC because it's all a collaborative effort.
Well, fantastic. Anything else you want to add about NDC, the Newton Development Corporation, Frank?
I just, I appreciate the opportunity I've had. When I look back at times and I think, holy Toledo, look at all this development that's happened over the years. I look at Lionsgate, the new apartments that were built. The first new multiplex was built in over 25 years. And it's much like radio, it's relationships. Because I remember the developer that built Lionsgate, the first thing I showed him was an opportunity to build what Jake Christensen doing here at Legacy Plaza. That wasn't the right fit for him. So he just said, that's not going to work for me, but keep me in mind. So then I remember the old Newton Seed Store and the old Waterworks building. Those were being vacated. They weren't very good shape anymore. So we kind of said, hey, city, why don't you acquire those? I think we got a developer. And sure enough, that just evolves. And the city acquired them. able to sell to the developer. And, again, it's just about relationships.
The future looks bright for Newton, Iowa.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. And,
definitely.
I appreciate you taking time to talk about the community and in your podcast. And that's a very important thing to do.
Well, a very important thing that you do too, Frank, and we do appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Our interview guest has been Frank Liebl with the Newton Development Corporation on Out and About with Jamie Grout.
Feeling a chill in the air? It must be Advantage Credit Union's Scary Good credit card offers. For a limited time only, get 1.99% introductory APR for 12 months on purchases and balance transfers made in the first 90 days with our Visa Classic Card. Or earn a one-time $250 statement credit when you spend $3,000 or more in the first 90 days with the Visa Rewards Card.
APR's annual percentage rate subject to credit approval. Terms and conditions apply. See acuiowa.org for details. Federally insured by the NCUA.
This podcast also sponsored by Tony Pesca, Iowa Realty. Give her a call at 641-417-8484. She found the right house for Little Red and myself, and she'll find the right house for you. Tony Pesca, Iowa Realty. Also, Newton Des Moines East KOA. You'll be hearing about their retreat that they have going on. You can get in one of those old-fashioned Airstream campers and some of their other old-school campers that they have going on and have yourself a fun weekend at KOA Newton Des Moines East. Also by the Salvation Army in Newton. They want you to know that they have a quilt auction coming up on November 8th. I'll be the auctioneer for that. Doors open at 6 o'clock, and we're going to have a good time auctioning off great quilts and also all kinds of baskets that you can bid on, too, to raise funds for the Salvation Army of Newton. Also by Johnson Aviation, they have a new plane coming in that they're all excited about. It has 100 more horsepower, resulting in higher cruise speeds at higher altitudes for a smoother ride at Johnson Aviation in Newton, also providing all kinds of flying lessons and charter flights, too. Our new sponsor, Frontier Cafe in Grinnell, a reunion of food and family at Frontier Cafe, and also the Pizza Ranch in Newton. We're with Dana from Newton Des Moines East KOA, and you have a retreat coming up. Tell us about that.
Well, we have a new retreat package. We invested in some really adorable vintage campers. We have 2 Airstreams that sleep 4 and a Shasta that sleeps 2 and another Forester that sleeps 2. These are sleeping campers that we offer up in a really cool atmosphere. Each one has its own patio, picnic table, fire pit. We also provide Blackstone grills so that you can grill out while you're staying with us. We have it all lit up with exterior patio lights and cute furniture and pillows. And all you have to do if you want to take advantage of our retreat packages, we have what's called an a la carte package where you just rent the campers themselves and come and stay. But we also are offering a retreat package that's called all inclusive, where we actually provide all of the food that you would possibly need for a weekend. Wow. And we buy meats from Ulrich Meats out of Pella. We buy local hamburger patties that are grass-fed. We provide the coleslaw, the potato salad, chips, waters, everything that you could possibly need. We even make homemade cookies and homemade brownies for desserts for the weekend. And all you and your family or friends have to do is show up. We can accommodate up to 12 people in the vintage row. And the pricing will be based on the items that you wish to take advantage of. But we've had people stay there. We have some great photos. You're going to be seeing us launch this program here coming up this next week in the first part of September. We're kind of late in the game this year, but we're hoping that we can introduce it to people and they can make their plans over the holidays and get booked for next year, because this is a spectacular program. You're right at the base of our pond, right across from the camp office and the pool, right across from the playground, plenty of parking. It's just a great experience for those people who want to experience camping or want to reminisce about the past if they used to camp in an Airstream when they were a kid. These are all 1960s, early 70s campers. And I think people would really enjoy it. We named them after the Golden Girls.
Oh, okay.
So we have Rose and Dorothy and Sophia and Blanche.
Uh-huh.
So, and each of the campers on the inside are decorated accordingly. So you need to come out and take a look at them. We invite people to just come out and take a look and see what we're talking about. And we would love for you to book a weekend with your family or friends at the Newton Des Moines East KOA Vintage Row.
Sounds like fun. How can they get a hold of you?
All they need to do is call 641-792-2428.
One more time with that phone number.
641-792-2428.
Until next time, grrr, out is out. See ya.